With that, I'm going to turn to introducing our first speaker, Jon Iwata. Jon is a practice leader of Yale Program on Stakeholder Innovation and Management, where he's an executive fellow and lecturer. He's a founding executive director of Data and Trust Alliance, a not-for-profit organization that brings together leading businesses to develop and adopt responsible data and AI practices. In his previous life, which is not in his bio, I noticed, like he spent 30 years at IBM. He was leading head of marketing, chief brand officer, and communications and citizenship there. And if he was a sports athlete, he would be sort of in all the Hall of Fame, which he is in for marketing. Jon is an inductee of the B2B Hall of Fame, the Marketing Hall of Fame, the CMO Club Hall of Fame, and the Page Society Hall of Fame. He was named a brand genius by Adweek. With that, please join me in welcoming Jon. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi. Good morning. It's good to see everybody. I'm glad Ravi talked about not only the new capabilities that we have available to us, but also the importance of trust. And I want to talk about that convergence today, which is how important trust is to our brands and to our leaders, and also some new drivers of trust and perhaps some new threats to trust, which is specifically the advent of AI. And I'm really glad that I get to show this chart first, because you'll probably hear references to it throughout your conference over and over again about all of the buzz around not just ChatGPT, of course, but generative AI, but broadly about AI, machine learning, and algorithmic systems in general. And for those of us of a certain vintage, well, I didn't live through the telephone thing, but pretty much everything else, mobile phone, World Wide Web. And I often reflected, if I could go back in time to 1995 or 96, knowing what would happen over the next 25 years of digital disruption, what would I do differently? What would IBM do differently? What would business leaders do differently? Same with the iPhone, same with social media. Well, here we are again, but we won't have the time to learn lessons the same way we did before. It is happening at breakneck speed. So yes, over the next 2 days, no doubt, you will hear a lot about the exciting capabilities, what you can do with this, the breakthroughs, the threats. But I also wanted to start here by talking about some very real issues that could either build up trust between a brand and its various stakeholders, or erode it, if not destroy it. And we have to be mindful of both. We have to be responsible. Because think of it this way. What was the real cost of messing up of not getting the internet right for the first year, 2, 3, 5? You were slow, you were disrupted. What's the cost of getting this one wrong? Completely different stakes. And therefore, if you touch brand and if you care about how business conducts itself in society, well, then all of these things are very relevant to us. I could update this chart every day. In fact, I updated it this morning. In your news feeds, you probably saw that story in the upper right. Wow. When I read that, I didn't understand half of it in terms of the tools and products that are just spewing out of the industry, and most of it available for free. As Ravi mentioned, I was, in my post-IBM life, I got involved with some CEOs who came together to say, in about 2019, 2020, it isn't just social media companies, it's every company staking its future on the use of data and AI, which is every company in every industry. We better get this right. So they said, let's get together, form an organization, and learn from each other. And I'm fortunate to lead that organization. Now it's 25 member companies, pretty big brands. They take this seriously. It's CEO-led. So much of what I'm going to share with you is channeling the CEO's agenda, not just the CMO's agenda or any other C-suite officer. And they care about both. That's why it's in our name here. They care about getting the value, the business value out of these investments in data and AI. How's it really going to give us competitive advantage? but also in ways that earn trust with stakeholders. So a couple of points. The first is this, and I think you know this. It's always been, garbage in, garbage out, but there's something very different about AI. Very different. Machine learning, deep learning. These are systems that learn. How do they learn? Well, they learn from the data. These are black boxes. You don't know how, well, yes, they're black boxes in some regard, but you do know, or you should know, what data trains them, what data they learn on through continuous interaction with the world, and the people who make those choices. That is knowable. So it's a bit of a cop-out to say, these are inexplicable. No, there are some things that can be examined, and they must be. Great TED Talk last month from this computer scientist, MacArthur Fellow winner, and so forth. Highly recommend you watch it. And this is basically the title of her chart. Why is that? And the point she makes is it's because of the data. Now, she kind of goes off on generative AI, ChatGPT, and so forth in this regard. Where does that data come from? Well, it's all the publicly available data in the World Wide Web, and it's full of misinformation and disinformation and racism and violence and hate. So if you want to train your model on that, you ought to be prepared to see some very strange things that come out, alarming things that come out of it. Her point, though, was aside from those large language models that are trained on the ocean of data out there, for business purposes, and I take it is a lot of what you will be doing and are doing, those are data sets that are chosen by people, not just what's available. Now, when we started the Data and Trust Alliance, we wanted to know, where should we start? What part of business and industry should we start? Did a survey of one part of all of these companies about their use of data today. That's the bar at the top, the line at the top, kind of light. And then the one at the bottom is, where will you be using algorithms and AI within 3 years, which is now this year. Which part of a company is this? Any guesses? Which function, which operation across all the companies in the Data and Trust Alliance? So it's a pretty good focus group of industry. Any guesses? Marketing? It's human resources. It's human resources. Does that surprise you? Do you think that when people upload their resumes and fill out job applications for companies like Walmart and Starbucks and CVS, that there are human beings who still read each one of those job applications? And. So this was quite an eye-opener that this is obviously long before ChatGPT, right? This is 2020, 2021, that algorithmic systems, AI systems that are in decision support are already in business today. In fact, by now, it's a safe assumption that algorithmic systems, AI systems, have already arrived in both the back office and front office, and this frenzy around Gen AI has just put it, on steroids. So what do we do? New piece of vocabulary for you. If you're not using it, I suggest that it will enter algorithmic safety. So HR, HR. The potential here is to remove bias. Potential here is to drive inclusion. The risk, it perpetuates bias. Why? Where does the bias come from? From human beings writing software code? Well, no, it's the data, like the TED Talk speaker said. If you don't like the results, or put it this way, if you like history to continue to repeat itself, then grab all the data from historical hiring decisions, promotion decisions, comp decisions, and just extend out into the future. But you can't do that. By the way, the primary way that HR functions, we learned, at least these companies, are getting these AI services is through vendors. Now, we had to really clarify that when we asked the question of them. Because we said, are you buying AI? They'd say no. You said, do you think that, say for example, how many of you use executive recruiting firms? All of them. Do you think that Heidrick Spencer, Korn Ferry, they in their back offices are using technology to identify, screen candidates and bring those candidates to you? Oh, yes. Do you think your benefits providers? Do you think? Yes. So what we did here is to create algorithmic safety tools, evaluation criteria, so they can scrutinize and evaluate their vendors. They can ask the right questions to ensure that what they're bringing into their companies to help them make good decisions over human capital, that they can detect, mitigate, and monitor, in this case, bias. It made news because, one, at that time, oh, this really is a new thing happening in business, and at least some businesses are stepping up. This is Ken Chenault, the former head of Amex, who's one of our two co-chairs of the Alliance. Let's talk about more in our neighborhood in marketing. We think, oh, AI, data, black boxes. Again, I want to challenge that, just to remind ourselves that, yes, it is data, and to some degree, these are black boxes. But there's still a responsibility of people in making decisions about what these systems are trained on, learn from, and works on. So take, for example, this. It starts with a theory. What's your theory of health? What's your theory of supply chain fluctuations? What's your theory about consumer behavior? I mean, this is a group of experts in that. And you might say, well, there are many factors that drive or bear on consumer behavior. And they might include things like this. And one of the great phenomena of our time is this is not a list of new things. These are just the way people behave. What is new in our time is that all of these things can be captured in data. So we're all rushing to capture the data sets to feed these models or train these models. So the marketer says, I believe consumer behavior is a factor of the things on the left, and if you're paired with a data scientist, they say, got it, let me go build a model. So if those are the things on the left, I got to go get the data sets to build my model, to train my model. And then it will continue to learn through interaction. Well, question, who actually made those decisions? And this is where diversity is a very, very different form of diversity than perhaps we're used to championing in our businesses. This is the diversity of these views that drive on what makes for a successful new hire in my company. Right? Is it people like us? What makes for a successful executive in my company? Depending on how you answer that question informs the model, because then the data scientist says, well, then let's go get people, or let's go get data that feeds the model, that reflects that hypothesis about who to hire, who to extend credit to, who to admit into Yale, or consumer behavior. Question then is, who or what is the composition of the team building and deploying these models? Now it really matters, because you want to screen for subconscious bias, have a very different sense of diversity. And then, of course, the data. The data. Like, what is in the data? Now, data quality, I don't need to tell this group, data quality is paramount, and yet, rather shockingly, consistent industry, cross-industry standards that define attributes of data quality don't yet exist. They're either going to come from regulation, or we at the Data and Trust Alliance are trying to tackle this right now. It's a massive problem. You could say it's not solvable because there are so many potential attributes to define data quality. Let me suggest to you that even before standards arrive, there are things that we can and should do to be responsible stewards of these models. So yes, there might be 75, 125 dimensions of data quality, but you can say there is a set or subset, call it data lineage. And even inside of that, if that's too ambitious, you can scrutinize for data provenance, the origin of the data. Now, those are very kind of specific terms, but if you just reduce it to questions that can be asked. So if you're buying this from a vendor, procuring it, or you are working with colleagues to build these models, you can and should ask common sense questions about the data origin. Where did this come from? When was it collected? How was it collected or synthesized? What rights are associated with the data? Those are basic questions. And you'd say, well, aren't they being asked today? Perhaps they are, perhaps they aren't. Don't wait for regulation to arrive, even de facto standards to arrive. Take responsibility now because, as you know, this is all being used and deployed right now, very, very quickly. Number two is going to require, I believe, some unlearning. Unlearning of the last 25 years of what makes for a digital competitive advantage, particularly around the customer journey and the user experience. Here's a counterintuitive thought here. Frictionless customer journeys may, in fact, undermine trust. So if you think about, an app or a website, what have we been trained to do in terms of designing and refining those experiences and touch points? Simple, intuitive, easy to use, frictionless, delightful, if not addictive. Well, when it comes to these kinds of experiences here, these are decision support systems. Now, generative AI is a category where it may stimulate creativity and so forth, but by and large, a lot of the systems that are these AI systems are to help you make a better decision. Doctor making a better decision, marketer making a better decision, hiring manager, and so forth. So you have to imagine this is a new kind of user interface. I'm not talking about talking to your computer or looking at 3D and all that. I'm talking about the actual interaction mode in service of what? Why do the CEOs invest in this stuff? Better decisions, better prediction that leads to better decisions. So that dynamic between an AI system making a recommendation or a determination or a suggestion and a human making the decision is just now being understood. But there is research going on, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. So in some cases, when they study the human interacting with an AI, what kind of decision is made? They don't trust the recommendation. In other cases, they overtrust the recommendation, automation bias. They just keep hitting the button, agree, agree, agree. It's like saying, here are 50 resumes, 25 of varying quality, and we're kind of scoring them for you, and you're saying, I want to interview all of them, just want to interview all of them, fine, 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 fine. Or don't extend credit to these groups, fine, 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 fine. Overtrust. What can improve trust or calibrate? Oh, you often hear the term explainability. If we explain to the user how we render this or came to this recommendation, that will improve trust. And in some cases it does. In other cases it doesn't. What if we show the user in the interface itself the system's confidence level in the recommendation? No effect, can have an effect. If this is confusing you, what this tells us is it matters. You show these to a CEO, and the CEO would say, I want them to have the appropriate levels of trust. That's why I'm making these investments. And the very fact that it matters to the human's decision-making, what they are interacting with, tells us that this is an important part of the ROI. Here's another one. The algorithm made me do it. I didn't make that decision. The system said I needed to do it. No, the system didn't tell you to make the decision. The system was helping you make a better decision. So this moral crumple zone is, no, I'm not accountable. And there isn't a CEO out there who's deploying one of these systems to say, no, you are accountable, back to trust, but we want you to use it the right way. So this idea of helpful friction is a very interesting concept, among others, in rethinking what makes for a good, great, desired user experience and customer journey if it involves AI. In fact, a YCCI speaker I met from MIT, Renee Gosselin here, there's a nice talk on the YCCI site. Highly recommend you watch it. And she wrote this HBR piece too. I'll just quote one part of it. Look at what she says here. Practice acts of inconvenience. That is antithetical to frictionless, delightful, simple, easy to use experiences, right? This is antithesis. In other words, she says here, actually put kinks in the journey so people stop and think. And that includes consumers. That includes every decision maker who will rely on in some way or look to one of these systems to help them make a better decision. I think it's fascinating. But again, a moment of unlearning and relearning if we really want to use these systems effectively and in ways that earn trust. Really quick one here. I don't want to be a bummer, but this is coming too. We used to joke about the SNLs and the onions and stuff, but these tools are so capable now and so cheap. In fact, the term is cheap fakes, because you can do them so quickly and they're so believable that it's inevitable that there will be a brand attack. Either not just making fun of your CEO or making fun of your product, but actually manipulating it, perhaps for stock fluctuations, for whatever the motivations are. The question is, if that happens to your brand, is that the first time you're going to think about it? Because your CEO is going to say, what is this? What is this video that's happening in my store or on my flight or in my hotel or with my executive team? First question is it real? How are you going to answer that? We don't want to say it's not real if it is real. You say, well, let's examine it for a week. You know what's going to happen here. So you got to treat this like a new form of cyber attack. You've got to anticipate scenarios. What will you do? Who will you call? Forensic experts to help. What will you say? How will you act? Don't wait, it's coming. And lastly, let's think about AI culture for a moment here. I'm not talking about AI culture in society. I'm talking about how our corporate cultures are going to need to evolve as we all start to use AI in every part of our organizations here. It does require a new literacy. Some of the terms I've used already may be new to you, maybe not. Algorithmic safety, data provenance, data lineage, explainability. All of these things are going to just be how we do business. And AI values, I've touched on one. We've got to be customer-centric. We have to be agile, MVP, put it out there, iterate. We'll make it better over time. That's been a cultural change that a lot of companies have gone through for decades. In this world, where you're not fixing code, you're not adjusting your website, you're not changing the offer on the fly to accelerate people through the funnel or the journey. These are systems that learn, and they don't correct their thinking by going in and adjusting one thing. Right? It's like a human. You don't unlearn something just because somebody says, that's no longer true. So part of the new culture may in fact be something that CEOs would find to be not right, which is we need to slow down sometimes. We need to embrace the complexity, not reduce everything to an MVP, and just get it out there and try it out on people because the stakes are so high. So that was really fast, but in keeping of how fast things are going in AI, just wanted to share with you some of the things that may be helpful to you. I won't read the chart, but these are some of the high points that I wanted to offer. I do think these and many others are important if we want to think about building trust and certainly not eroding trust in our brand. Finally, I do hope that Steve Jobs is proven right again. And no doubt when he said this, he was thinking about laptops and phones and so forth. But it certainly does apply, we hope, more than ever to this world-changing technology that has arrived in full force, AI. I think we have time for a few questions and comments, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you.